Hey everyone, welcome back to the Fly Fishing Insider podcast. I'm your host, Christian Bacasa. This week we have Emma Brown on the line. Emma is a longtime angler, a young longtime angler, 23 years old, but you started as a child with your father going up, and then you got really serious around the age 15 when you could start driving and really making your own life as an angler. So you got some pretty cool stories there to tell, I'm sure. Adventures as a 15-year-old in Longmont, Colorado, driving up to the Boulder Creek and small streams of the mountains. So this is going to be a great day. We're going to talk about a couple things this week. Number one, small stream tactics, creeks, wild fish, and conservation. Those are like your wheelhouse areas, Emma, as you described, your biggest interests. And I love it because it's a little bit juxtaposed to, what we talk about a lot of times in people getting enamored on the big fish, right? And there's so many beautiful places you can go to just grab small fish and have a blast of a time fishing. And it's easy to forget that at times. And there are people who purely focus on that, and I love that too. Get into that wing. But you have about 3 years experience in guiding. You've guided with places like Budge's Lodge, which we had Bob Terwilliger on earlier. Great location, has a lot to offer. You did it with the women, or let's see here, Uncharted Outdoors Women, right?
Yep.
And then also Lincoln Hills. So you've bounced around a little bit, got some great experience. And then the last end of the show really ties into that. And that is the tip of the day. And that's, breaking into the outdoor industry as a young adult, and how to do that. And what is often perceived as this big obstacle probably can be easily overcome with just a few little tips. And you've got some great tips for us. So we're going to talk about that too. First and foremost, let's get to the fishing. That's what we all love. That's what you're passionate about. I'm passionate about. So you said, Christian, I would love to talk about small streams, conservation, and wild fish. So dive into that. Why is that so important, and your passion so high for that?
Yeah. Thank you for having me on today. I am super stoked to talk about it. I grew up fishing small creeks, and it was like right in my backyard on the Front Range. So I grew up 10 minutes north of Boulder, and I went to school in Boulder. And eventually, when I was able to get my driver's license, I was able to drive up Boulder Canyon and, pull off on some of the pull-offs and try my best at catching fish and rock hopping across that tiny little stream. It's like a little canyon. And there's some great fly shops in Boulder. And so I would go hit up the fly shop, get like a burrito, and then go up the canyon and try to catch some fish. I wasn't really good at it until, 8 months after I actually knew how to cast after graduating 16.
Right.
But I was really, really excited when I caught my first brown trout, and I just went from there and just kept fishing every single day. I would leave high school. We had like open campus at my high school, and so we could go off the school campus, and so I would just go to Boulder Canyon, go fishing. And I had a couple good friends with me who went and did that, and that was kind of my first like insight to the world of fly fishing, and eventually just it grew from there. So yeah, I love the small creeks. I still fish them today, and they're still amazing and get me as excited as I was when I was that age.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Tell me that story of that first brown trout. Like, how did it go down? I mean, like, walk us through it.
Yeah.
All the details. What did it smell like? Everything.
Oh gosh. It was probably like 2 inches long, and I caught it on my grandpa's old Sage 2-piece. It was like an RPL, and I don't make those anymore. And he gave it to me, and he was like, do whatever you want with it. I don't know if you'll catch anything on it, but there you go. I'm too old. And so I took that, and you like stick it in, because it's so long. That case is like 6 feet long because it's a 2-piece. So I would like stick it through the back window of I had like an F-150 at the time. So it was like sticking out the back window in the cab. And so, you drive up, 30 minutes into the canyon, and I would like, fumble around with my tippet and just like, okay, this is a dry fly. I'll put this on. I think I put like a stimulator on, and then I put a zebra midge, and that's what I'm going to do for the day. And I think my length of tippet between those two flies was, this
6 inches,
long.
right?
Yeah, it was not great. It was a hot mess, but those fish were hungry, and I, dropped it right into this little pool, and it welled up through the bubbles and stuff, and all of a sudden I saw that dry fly pop under the surface. Oh, and set the hook wrong, and almost lost it. And I think it was so small that I like ripped it out of the water. And I was like,
Took it
whoa,
for some frequent flyer miles.
Exactly. And I had my little, net with the handle where it's like this long. It's, a tiny little net. So it's like leaning into the water super hard, and scooped it up, and it was a tiny little thing, but I was so excited. I felt so accomplished. I thought I was like the coolest person ever. I was like, sponsor me. I'm the best. And yeah, so I kept going back to those same pull-offs in Boulder Canyon and Fish Boulder Creek, and just practice and practice and practice. And I got involved with some cool people after that, and was able to find some mentorship, and here I am now. So, 2-inch fish I still catch, but I still love it. So
yeah. Well, hey, it's burned into that memory of endorphins, right? I mean, I get it. Some of my more exciting. I remember one of the early ones for me was the first little fish that I saw and sight casted to, and it was a little bow and arrow cast, and I screamed like I was, for lack of a better term, a little girl, in excitement. And I was so pumped to get that little fish. And it was like an endorphin explosion. Like I did exactly what I thought I was going to do, so it was so cool. Totally. So now you went from that scenario to, like you said, now you're in school, you met a group of people, you really started to get active, your learning curve changed, etc. But you always kept that passion for small creeks, and you started to develop your skill set there. So let's talk about how that process went about, and in the steps you took to get better there.
Yeah. So I guess when I first looked at small creeks, I grew up actually fishing the Bighorn River up in Montana with my dad and my grandpa. So we would go up there, it's big water. I didn't know anything about how to read big water. We were on a drift boat. It was pretty much just cast, you catch fish, it's huge. And so when, I started on the small creeks, I was like, where are the fish? Like, are there even big enough fish to live in this river, this creek? So I think that's what hooked me in. I was like, wow, like there are little ecosystems in this tiny little creek, and you can catch them, and it's really technical, and you got to crouch down low under the willows. And that's what really hooked me in, because it was very physical, kind of like I felt like an athlete when I was, hiking through, tromping through the willows. But after I turned 16 and got my driver's license, I started reaching out to conservation groups because my high school required a volunteer aspect to graduate. And so you needed like 120 hours to graduate and walk. And I was like, okay, I want to do something that, I'm good at, but it won't really feel like I'm working that much. I was like, fishing. I can do fishing.
Right. Typical high school kid, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Hey, I get it.
Yeah, and it worked out really good. I reached out to a group called the Greenbacks in Colorado Trout Unlimited, and they were doing summer camps.
So let me go back. The Greenbacks, is that a branch of a TU organization?
So
okay, so that's a local TU club.
Yes, it's an affiliate group, and I now co-lead it, which is pretty exciting. It's really fun. Cool. Yeah, and so I reached out to the president at the time. Okay, I need to graduate. I really like fishing and I want to learn more about conservation. And, my grandpa was a lifetime member of TU or whatever. And this is a good place to start. So I reached out to them and the president at the time, her name was Heather. And so that was kind of my first, role model. And it was a woman. It was a really great woman who was a leader in the fly fishing world. And she was super cool. She talked to me on the phone and she was like, yeah, we have a camp coming up in Colorado Springs. It's with kids that are your age. They're 16, 17. We're teaching them how to fly fish. Go down there, volunteer, do whatever, they need you to do. And I didn't even meet anyone from Trout Unlimited. They just had me sign a little form and a waiver. And then they're like, cool, drive down, go represent the greenbacks. And I did. And it was amazing. And that was the first volunteer aspect in conservation that was fly fishing based. And I got to work with kids that were my age and teach them what I love to do. And it was really fun. It was super cool. And that was my first taste of, instruction. It wasn't necessarily guiding, but, fly fishing instruction for other kiddos or other people. And so, yeah, that was kind of where I started guiding, I guess, and instructing. But it was a really great way to get into the industry. It was very natural, very organic. And I had a great mentor through that program.
Sounds like it. Sounds like you had a really cool introduction that was relatively seamless in nature of I made the right connection with the right person at the right time, etc.
Totally.
But you were already pretty proficient fishing wise. And it sounds like kind of teaching a little bit really even helped that some more. Is that true?
Yeah, I think being able to teach what I had really struggled with, 2-3 years prior, teaching myself, being able to teach another person that was my same age, or even younger or older, adults I was teaching to, that instilled the sense of confidence that, I do know how to do this. And I think that's the confidence that I have now with guiding professionally. And that's what I really take into my adult, professional fly fishing career. And I'm really grateful that I was able to do that at such a young age because it's just so important. So it was a great experience.
Yeah. Cool. Let's talk a little bit about small stream fishing and your tactics.
Yeah.
Why don't you break us down? Let's go about it this way because I want to include the Boulder Creek area because I think that's a nice destination place, easy access kind of scenario. A lot of people are aware of it or heard of it, etc. You fish all kinds of small streams. So let's talk about your small stream tactics, and then let's bounce back to Boulder Creek, and you can give us some advice on hey, these are the tactics I really like to use up there, and why and how the water is, and et cetera, what to expect.
Sure. I love small stream fishing because it's really the same thing every time. And consistency I can do. And that's good for fly fishermen. That's good for anglers, especially people who are wanting to learn. So the small creeks and the difference between those small creeks to that big water that I grew up fishing, like the Bighorn, when you have smaller water, it's easier to see the flow of the water, the depth of the water. Typically these smaller rivers have, willows or, outcroppings of rocks that kind of, ease into the river. And if they don't, then it's a bunch of big boulders that are just kind of placed and scattered throughout the canyon. And you typically don't find something different than that with that water. And that's what I love because it's, like I said, the same thing every time, and I can do that.
Right.
So, and through the conservation, the background of understanding how, the ecosystems of rivers work, that's what taught me where fish are. And so if the environment and the physical features of the water is typically the same, then that the fish are going to be, in the same kind of areas.
Okay, so let's start there then. When you walk up to a piece of water, what are the immediate reads for you? right? Because a lot of people struggle with reading water. In
Totally.
small creeks, it's typically very well defined because of that confinement, right? So
Mm-hmm.
if you could break
Yep.
that down for us, that would be helpful.
Yeah. So when I first walk up to a river or a small creek, I look at, um, typically I don't look at the river. I look at what's around it. So is there a road next to it? Is there, a canyon wall face on the other side? Can I get to both sides of the river? Is it really deep in the water so I can't get to the other side? These are all questions I'm thinking about as I walk up or I'm hiking to where I want to fish. Um, I look
And
at plant life.
why
Oh,
is that first section? Why are
yeah.
you looking at those things?
Yeah, it all depends on access. So if I know where I can position myself, then I know where to go first and what places to prioritize in terms of catching a fish or where the fish
Okay.
can be. And that's how I decide if I fish this place first or if I cross the river first and fish the other side. Um, and that's always my go-to now with even big water, but typically all small streams, that's the sequence of steps I go through.
Okay.
And I also look at, are there a bunch of plants? Are there not a bunch of plants? Is it sandy bottom or is it rocky and dark? What kind of color is the water? Is it clear? Is it overcast above? I try to take in all my surroundings, and then I look at the water and I look and try to read the flow of the water and the depth of it. And so it's kind of like if you had uh, a camera lens, you look at the big picture and then you kind of narrow it down closer and closer. And that's what helps you prioritize where to fish, or helps me at least.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's
Oh, I
always
love that.
been,
I love that
yeah,
lens diagram. That's perfect.
yeah. And that's like, I've never not caught fish. So it works for me. So, um, but yeah, it's typically in Colorado, we have, a lot of willows. Our rivers tend to be pretty healthy. These small creeks bounce back from, floods or, fires. That's a big thing that people are talking about now in the canyons
Mm-hmm.
on the Front Range. But typically they bounce back really well and the fish come back. And so if you can see plant life, then that's always a plus because that means there's bugs, that means there's food. And then it just kind of means there's a more balanced ecosystem in that,
Mm-hmm.
small river or canyon. Um, and then after that, I look at depth of the water. Typically, it's pocket water in the rivers in the canyons, and so if it's super super deep and super short from the drop off of the river, or there's a little waterfall going into the little pockets of water, then I might take a peek in there. But typically, I like to look at bigger runs and riffles of water that I can fish and get more than 3 casts in before having to move on. And that's just because I know there's space for fish to live and exist in. And there's also, you have more of a drift. So bugs come down, fish know that bugs will come through that run and they will hang out there forever. And even if you snag into one in that run, you'll probably catch a couple more in there because there is so much pocket water in the canyons.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And now you start to target those waters. So do you typically rig up for the average, or are you changing your rig quite a bit based on the pocket that you walk up to, etc.?
Yeah. I call me a lazy guide or a lazy angler, but I don't change my stuff very often. I will change probably my bottom fly more than my top if I'm fishing a dry dropper rig. And that's just because if they're gonna hit the surface, they're gonna hit it. If they don't, then you know to change. Um, your stuff underneath is kind of what matters, and you can go in and pick up rocks and match the hatch. What is what people like to say.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's like midges. Midges are kind of the go-to year-round in these small streams because the ecosystem stays pretty much the same in these rivers,
Mm-hmm.
and you'll see that happen, typically through on freestone water more so than tailwater. Tailwater also has consistent, food sources, and it stays the same temperature throughout the year. But the freestone, I mean, midges are go-to for that, and that's what I get people on fish with the most in freestone water. So yeah,
it's pretty straightforward, right? I
it
mean,
is.
now you're targeting. So you walk up to a pool, right? You got, let's say, an overflow, small waterfall into a pool. Pool has a little bit of a run in it, has some boulders in it. Where are you starting out and why?
If it has some length in there, if it's a longer run, I'll start downstream so I can work myself up, because typically you don't get a lot of room in the mountain streams. And I get tired easily, so I want to stay in one place. And so I'll look at where those boulders are. Typically, there's almost every time there's like a fallen log or fallen timber in the water. And that's also a really good thing to look at, because the water will come through at the tip of that fallen log, and there's almost always a lot of fish hanging out right downstream of that log, just waiting for food to pass by in that faster current. And it's just like the small streams are just a great example of like textbook fun fishing, and like the fish hang out in the slower stream, and the food comes down in the fast water. And so I'll typically start downstream and work my way up through each kind of physical land feature, whether it's a log or a boulder or faster water. And then you'll usually hit like a waterfall or, a tiny little fast moving, white crested part of the river. And you'll have to rock hop and move up quite a bit until you get to the next run. So, yeah.
Yeah. And for you, one of the things I see people struggle with in small streams is they hook up with a fish and then it's like, well, now what do I do? And the fish ends up downstream of them, and excuse me, all those scenarios, they're doing the loop-de-loop around their legs and whatnot. For you, when you're guiding or by yourself, are you taking that into consideration ahead of time of like, hey, if I'm fishing the back of this pool, I want to get that thing out of there quick. I want to try and land it over here real fast so that I can keep working that hole and not spook everything else?
Yeah, totally. Always. Because you won't land fish unless you have a good exit route to get to your fish. And like sometimes that's just how it is when you're either in the backcountry or, in really steep terrain. And sometimes, you can try to be a ninja and be stealthy with that and slide down a rock face. But at that point, it's just unsafe. So I really try to think about that as I approach and look at the water. And, I'm like, do I want to stand here or there? Or can I actually lean down safely to net this fish? Or do I have to wade in quite a bit to that deeper part of the river? I try to be really mindful and tactile of my strategy to get to the fish that I need. Typically they're tiny, so I can, kind of like hook them, when they're up there, and then, drag them down and then kind of loop them in if I have the room. But if you don't, I've lost fish because of that. So I try to be mindful and show people that you need to physically set yourself up where you can catch fish and where you'll be successful. So set yourself up for success, I guess, is good on the small water.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love how in small streams, they're not tippet shy, and it doesn't matter anyhow, because you can fish 5X and it's still not small tippet for small fish. So it's like, it's the best of both worlds in that scenario of like, I can rig up light and be stealth. And boy, if I do get into something that's of size, I'm still probably overpowered in a lot of ways. It's more of at that point, like you said, managing the fish in the system. Yep. And I think that comes back to that beautiful analogy you used of the lens, right? If you understand the whole environment, it comes all together. Yep. Then especially if you start wide and narrow it in, that's really cool. You have this conservation and wild fish scenario that you really like, and you mentioned earlier the conservation side really helped you understand where fish live and how they thrive in the system. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you got that, and maybe give us some advice on, hey, you get involved with this or that, and it'll get you a little further.
Yeah, totally. I first got involved through that through Trout Unlimited, through Colorado Trout Unlimited. I just volunteered with them, and a lot of those volunteer opportunities that are open to the public, open to anyone who wants to be involved, were, planting willows in restoration projects on rivers. So we planted a lot of willows up in Fraser Creek, Fraser River. So actually, the man up there who spearheaded that whole project was Kurt Clanky, and he pretty much restored that whole stretch of the Fraser River Valley to make it back to that. I think it's gold medal water. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's a beautiful stretch of water, whether it is or not. But he pretty much repaired most of that river through the willow planting projects and through restoring that growth zone of willows alongside the river.
And did that. I'm gonna interrupt because a lot of people, I don't know if they understand what the importance of planting willows along the edge of a river is. Some people actually look at it as, why are you planting willows there? I'm going to get my fly line in it.
Yeah,
but,
true.
Do you know, can you talk a little bit about that? I have a little history on it as well. So go ahead.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm not a scientist, but mostly it protects the drainage and the basically the physicality of the river. So it provides more of a root system next to the river, so that zone between land and river in between is super healthy. And they've got the willow roots in there to protect, sand coming in, outside soils coming in to acidify or damage the water at all. And then also it just provides a lot of plant life for insects and moose, and pretty much if you go through all of the animals that need water to survive, then they will also go through the willows and circle of life. And so
and it's a big supporter of erosion.
Yes.
As well. Yeah. And what typically a lot of times will happen is if you don't have that edge life, like you said, that root system holding that in place, you get erosion. And what the erosion then leads to is a small creek becoming a very wide creek, which then becomes a shallow creek because there's the same amount of water going into it. And that shallow creek then becomes warmer water from a freestone water system, which leads to kill off scenarios. So not only the bug life, but the fish, et cetera, down the line. So it's a very easy, simple process to go plant willows, and you can do a lot as a group in a small day.
Totally.
And I love how you said, like, I met all these people, and it's a great activity. I've done it myself, where you go out and you plant willows and you're talking to people, and next thing you know, you're next to a guy who's 60, 70 years old and has 40 years of fly fishing experience, and you're chatting about where fish live, and your learning curve is like, oh my gosh, head explosion. Totally. Right? It's great.
Yep. Yeah, I think that's the best way to connect, and it was the best way for me to get into the fly fishing world, just by planting willows, helping out, trying to make the world a better place, but also meeting other people who are in that same mindset of bettering the environment and making the sport that they love, fly fishing, last longer and endure. So I'm very grateful for it. But on top of the willow planting, we also did, we hiked fish up. So we hiked fish up into Zimmerman Lake. Basically they have these little baby fish of greenback cutthroat trout, and they put them in a pack, and you hike them up and pack them into a lake or a section of a river where they're trying to restock that population of greenback trout. And I remember doing that when I was like 17, 18, and it was the coolest thing ever for me. I would grab all my friends and be like, let's go backpacking. They allow you to camp up there, and then they allow you to fish it. So you're standing next to a park ranger and a biologist, and you just help them, for the past 2 days, but then you get to catch the wild fish that live in this, river that's pretty far away from civilization. And it's just a cool opportunity that's, pretty easy to do for everyone to get
Yeah.
involved with. So, yeah.
Yeah. And you're catching fish next to a scientist who
Yeah,
knows
which is the
all
coolest
about them.
thing.
And yeah, and then you whip that thing out and they're like, "Oh, did you know the
Yeah.
so and so?" And they start breaking,
Yeah.
and you're like, "Hey, man, I'm like on Jeopardy right now. Let's
Yeah, I
do this."
know. Yeah. 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 It was
Very
such a
cool.
great fun thing to do. So, yeah.
Well, you dove in head first, and it certainly paid off for you. You've become quite the angler. I've heard great things about you through the group up at Budge's Lodge, where you guide now. You got a great personality. But there's an element of this last tip that plays into a lot of that stuff. So let's talk about that. You expressly mentioned, I would really love to talk about the breaking into the industry because you had expressed that I think there are some perceived barriers that really aren't there if you just take a couple steps. So give us some description of that and some of the things you've done and recommendations.
Yeah. I think I'm seeing the conversation of barriers in the outdoors world come up in the last couple of years, especially after 2020. And that's been the huge topic for every outdoors business and company. And, for me, it was like, yes, there totally are barriers there, but I mean, there are solutions to those. And you have the right steps to get into the industry, then you can do it. And some of those steps were exactly the ones that I took. So it was just being really passionate about something and then reaching out and like, hey, I'm interested in conservation and fly fishing. Can you help me get involved? And can you support me in trying to get involved? And people saw that initiative, especially in a young age, and they're like, send her away, make her do things. And they were really, Trout Unlimited people at the time were really excited about a young person getting involved. And I think that is kind of the key for other young adults to get involved, is to find something that you love or it doesn't feel like work all the time, and dive headfirst into it, because there are projects and there are companies that need help with, extra hands, and young people can do that. And that's a place that we can kind of fill. And then I think just practice your stuff with fly fishing. Like, go fish. You're not going to be good at it unless you go fish.
Right.
And so whatever that is, right? Like fly fishing, the skill of it is perishable. It's like a skill that gets rusty if you don't do it. So going and having fun with your friends or getting a guide trip or going to classes is not only the best way for you to learn how to fish and get those technical skills down, but also a good way to network, because no one's going to want to work with you unless you show that you're available and willing and excited to be there.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's my secret sauce. It's not really secret, but it's just, have the initiative, have the drive, be stoked about what you want to do, and ask for help. People will help you if you ask for it.
Yeah. Would you say also that having a give to get personality helps quite a bit?
Totally. Yeah. I think, especially for me, like I'm a woman of color, and I think that topic of, the BIPOC community in the fly fishing world is a really guarded topic, I think, and people are really tense about it. But it's the same thing. I mean, if you're interested about something, like, reach out, ask for help, be interested, be willing to talk to people, and be willing to be uncomfortable if you need to be, and just understand yourself as well as the stuff that you're getting into. And nothing bad is going to happen to you. And if it does, then people go through bad things and uncomfortable things all the time, and the hard times will pass. And
yeah,
if you really love it,
grow from it.
Yeah, if you really love it, you'll make it happen. And I can't think of a better industry to be in than the outdoors industry. So, and there's space for all of us here, and I hope people understand that. So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's important to understand too that as somebody in the outdoor industry, these vendors, manufacturers, guide services, etc., professionals in the outdoor industry, they're approached all the time. And it's from all walks of life. And they've also probably been approached multiple times by youthful, energetic young adults who've burned them. Right. And so
Totally.
your ability to come to the table and say, I'm really interested in this. Can you help me out? And I know that's an ask, but what can I do for you too?
Yeah.
Right. Because it has to be a give scenario. It's mutually beneficial. If you start thinking things as mutually beneficial, how can I help you? I mean, literally just asking that after even you've asked, hey, I really want to learn more about conservation. How can I help you guys with that?
Yeah.
I mean, that's a totally different conversation than, I really want to learn about conservation. Can you take me out and teach me all day about that? And
Totally.
it'll be a great time for me, but it's going to be a lot of work for you.
Yeah.
Right. So like, it's like, it's the dating game, right? I'm like, I'm going to buy you a few drinks before I say, hey, let's go on a date. Right. I mean, so. Well, Emma, it's been really cool having you on the show. Any last parting thoughts for the group?
I think just if you want to get into the industry of fly fishing, go fishing. 1, 2, be willing to work hard, and I hope you love the outdoors, because it'll be a journey, and if you love it, it will happen. So, thank you so
Thanks
much.
for being on today, Emma. Appreciate it. We had a great time learning from you. I can't wait to get up on some small creeks here this year, but it's going to be a while. We got a lot of snowpack, so it's going to be some heavy runs for a few more weeks, I think. But good to have you on the show. Can't wait to get out there to Colorado to see some of the folks I've interviewed lately, and you're one of them. So that's it for us this week, guys. We'll see you next week.